Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Wheelchair Activist. This is a podcast hosted by me, Emma Vogelman, where I interview some pretty amazing disabled people and some amazing allies of the disabled community. Today I am talking to the wonderful Kay Ashton, who is the host of Love, Life, and Disability. That's another amazing disability-focused podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking to Kay all about her experience of undergoing IVF as a disabled person, and importantly, a single disabled person. Before listening to this episode of the podcast, I want to let everyone know that this conversation with Kay was recorded before the recent U.S. Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe vs. Wade, which provided women with a constitutional right to an abortion in the U.S. This episode talks about pregnancy and a woman's right to choose what she does with her own body, so please bear that in mind before listening to this episode. Kay, thank you so much for joining us on The Wheelchair Activist. I'm really excited to chat to you today as a fellow disability podcaster, but can you tell my audience a little bit about you, what you do, and a bit about your podcast?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much, Emma, for inviting me on today. So I'm Kay Ashton. I'm a white woman with brown hair and blue eyes. I'm living in Manchester / Salford. Everyone gets that one a little bit confused. And day job wise, I work within disability, so advising on disability. And outside of work, I'm a podcaster and vlogger, looking at disability, but I'd like to say it's more like solution focused. So looking at the positives, what we have done and achieved, and trying to find different ways to go about things. So sometimes I might speak to neurotypical or non-disabled people who may do consultations to help people to get to where they want to in life. I'm currently blogging my journey with IVF as a single disabled person wanting to have a child.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And there's so many things about that I want to ask you about. But I think before we jump into all of that, I have this big question that I ask all of my guests, and I'm aware it's kind of a mean, big question, but what does disability mean to you?
It's a tricky word, I think, because I like to look at my ability on what I can do, where I want to go in life, and being able to find ways around things. I think in life, everything can be disabling, whether or not it's people's attitudes, people's barriers or perception, whether or not it's a building or an environment. It's a word that I think some people say is like a dirty word, and they need to learn to say it and know that it's an okay word to say. Like, disabled, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong about it. But for me, being a person living with disability, I try and look at the ability part of it.
And that really comes through as well in your title of your podcast, which is Love, Life, Disability, but the ability is in all caps, which I really love. So no, I think that that's really interesting. And it was actually really strange, but exciting timing from my point of view that we were going to be chatting today, because I was listening to another disabled person do a talk earlier this week, and she was saying how so much of the time doctors assume that, well, we all know that doctors quite often assume that disabled people are asexual, that, we can't possibly have a sex life, and that as well, we definitely don't want children, or we can't have children, and all of that. And she found that really difficult to sort of deal with on a personal level. So I was so interested to talk to you today about your journey into motherhood and sort of what your experience has been, especially as, like you say, as a single mom. Sort of like, what's that? Let's start with the beginning. How did the how did the conversation start with doctors that you wanted to do this?
I was just going to touch upon something there you said as well, Emma, about people just assuming that we're asexual and all of that. It's only recently quite a few of my doctors have actually established that I was straight. They've just assumed my
Oh,
entire life that I'm a lesbian or that I'm gay, because when my doctor asked me, he's like, "Oh, have you got a girlfriend at the moment?" Then I was like, "Girlfriend?" I went, "I'm straight, mate. Like, I like guys." And he's like, "Oh, since
that
when?"
that's
I was
so
like,
interesting.
"It's always been the way. I've always liked guys." And he's like, "Oh, I just, I'm never so sorry." I was just like, "It's cool, dude." I was like, quite a lot of people think it, because I am quite boyish. I dress like a boy quite a bit, like tomboy. I wear a lot of hoodies. I don't wear shoes. I don't own any shoes. I don't own sandals, slip-ons. I rarely wear makeup. So a lot of time, I think just people have perceived me maybe to be a certain type of person, and instead of just asking the question.
That's so interesting because when you think about sort of being out and about in the world and the way that society is, it's sort of you're presumed straight unless proven otherwise, which, I think like Gen Z and, younger people are getting really good at challenging and not assuming, which is definitely something that needs to happen. But I think it's really interesting as well from a disability angle, and I'm sure that like other disabled people will be able to identify with this, but the there have been definitely a few times where I'm out with my female carer, my female PA, and people have assumed that it's my romantic partner, which I think is just I don't even know where that comes from, but it's that's a presumption, which I think is really interesting. So do you think that the fact that you wanted to be a single parent and go through IVF potentially made them think, oh, she's definitely not straight, she's definitely not with a
Mhm.
guy?
I wouldn't be surprised if it had something to do with it, but like my team, what I'm going through the IVF with, they know that I'm straight. So basically, one of your questions before was, how did it come about? So me and my ex-boyfriend, we were going through the IVF together, but then he was a no-show to the appointment twice. And he was the one that started the process and was saying, we're now ready, let's take this move, because we knew it would take many years. So it was trying to get ahead of the curve. There's no point us waiting 2.5, 3 years to then go, we now want children, to then wait another 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So we joined the list after a year and a half of going out with each other. But then after 6 months, they were inviting us to the appointments to start to prepare us. And yeah, he just went off the face of the earth. And I was like, is it because it's going too fast? And he's like, well, no. He's like, I have a job. He says, I'm just too busy to be going to all these hospital appointments. And I'm like, yeah, but this is what it's going to be like anyway, going out with me. I'm just going to be in and out of the hospital all the time. And we transferred, we waited again for the next appointment, and then he was a no-show to that. So then I ended the relationship. I thought, if you're like this now and there's no baby yet, what are you going to be like at that point? And then I got took into hospital for an operation, and we were still together at this point. And then this was pretty much the nail in the coffin. He was meant to come and pick me up from hospital, was a no-show, didn't turn up. And he said to me, I remember going down, my operation was at 1 o'clock. I started to go down at 12. And he said he'd wait for me in like the resource area for like 4 o'clock for me to go home. Never turned up. 8 p.m. at night, he came to the hospital.
Wow.
And obviously they were saying it was too late for me to go home, so I had to overnight. And they wouldn't even allow him on the ward because 8 o'clock is when visiting shuts. And he's like, yeah, but I want to see my girlfriend. And they're like, should have been here 4 hours ago, mate. That's when she needed you. So then I thought, that's 2 IVF appointments. Your girlfriend's just had major surgery, and nah. So I thought I deserve better. So then I asked the team then if I could carry on my own, and they were like, "Oh, just wait in case you get back together." And I'm like, "No," I was like, "He's not the kind of person I need. I need a man. I need a decent person, somebody that will love me and understand what I've got to go through, instead of maybe." It's about priorities, I think, at that moment in time. So then I waited, and then I went ahead on my own, and here we are.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, part of me wants to get his name and address and run him over in my chair, because that's not how you treat anyone, let alone a partner who you want to make, a lifelong commitment with. Having a baby is not a small step by any means. So, I mean, I'm sorry that you had that experience, and I find it astonishing that medical professionals suggested to put this plan on hold to see if you get back together with someone who clearly is not ready. But how did the conversation then go when you were sort of like, no, I'm not going to wait around for this person. I want to do this on my own. Were they receptive?
They were perfectly on board with it. I think I'd say the hospital were fine about it. For me, it was just trying to process, oh, well, where you're going to get your donor sperm from, which clinics do they work with, whereby I can seek for the donor. Then, because it's then not funded on certain parts, I then have to then save to work out that part of the treatment. And then also then have the conversations with my parents and have conversations with family. And we know, due to the disability, that I am progressing. I'm not necessarily going to get better. My tumours will keep growing and my health will deteriorate the older I get. So it's trying to explain to them. And I think their preference would have been for me to have waited until I've met somebody. But if you think about it now, I've been single 4.5 years since I ended it with him. And I've dated people for about 2 months, if that. So I think it goes to show, even in 4.5 years, I've still not met anybody that I've liked enough to be able to commit to be in a relationship with. I've not got that time to be messing around. And like I say, I've still not met somebody. And even if I did meet somebody, in order to do the PGD process, which I've been having, you've got to be going out of each other a year before you can even apply. So then I'm going to be 33, even if it's now. Then it's 2.5 years. I'm going to be 36, 37. I'm going to be like 38, if I'm lucky, by the time I had to have my first child. So I just know that time isn't on my side and I need to move on. And my theory is, if I ever meet somebody, the right person will be understanding anyway. And there's many people that have children, split up, and still find somebody else to go out with. And most people my age have children now anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's not uncommon, even if you're on a dating app or something, to see someone who has a kid or has multiple kids. So I think that, I'm so, so pleased that you're going ahead with it on your own, because that's what you want to do for you. And if it really is, appealing to the feminist in me, like, yeah, why should you wait around for, someone to come along to potentially derail what you want and, what you want for your life journey, your path, and all of that. And so, where are you now in the process? I saw on your blog that, you had an article about sperm donors and sort of what you look for. And I loved your comparison to, sperm donor and a dating app. Like, what do you look for? So, yeah, where are you in the process?
So at the moment, I've had my eggs removed and they've gone off for the testing. So now I've got some embryos and I'm just awaiting the dates now, ready for an embryo transfer. So hopefully within the next 2 months, I'll be having the embryo transfer. So fingers crossed, by August, hopefully I might be pregnant. Hopefully.
Oh, that's so exciting. how was the select sperm donor selection process? Because I mean, I don't even know where to start. What do you look for? You see it in like Friends and things like that, where they, talk about the IQ, or, did you need braces as a kid and all of that? But what is it actually like?
It's a weird process. I think it's weird because, okay, with one sperm bank, because it was a non-UK sperm bank, I could hear voice clips of the donor into as he is today, so
Oh,
as an adult.
wow.
And I could also see photos of him as a child. So between, let's say, 6 months to the age of 5, they had a selection of photographs and you got to see his handwriting. You got parents and brothers and sisters, all their part of the journal as well. So it would say if any of his siblings had anything wrong with them, or if the parents, grandparents were alive, died, what they died of. And it's showing you like the full ancestry of what they knew about the donor. Like a massive portfolio, if they smoked, did drugs, everything. A lot of information, more than you would actually find out about a potential partner, to be fair. Within the first probably year, like when I was going out my exes, half of the information that I found out about my donors, I would not even know about any of my exes or their family. So I always found that really interesting. However, the donor I picked was amazing, but it was causing complications bringing that over into the UK because Brexit took place. So then I had import duties, I had tax then to pay on top. But they were saying they can't just ship one over to me, because if that didn't defrost correctly on the day that my eggs are come out of me, then that's a wasted treatment for me, because you need another backup ready to go. So then they wouldn't have been able to have got it to the UK in time for it to fertilise, basically. So they were saying that could cause complications there. So I had to buy a minimum of 2 specimens, get that sent, then you're paying for your delivery. But I also needed him to have a blood test to check for my genetic disability, which then they were trying to charge me at the same cost of sperm. So before you knew it, just for 2 batches of sperm, a blood test, delivery, because I'd have to have paid for that twice because it's got to come separately. You're talking of just short of £6,000. So I didn't have that sort of money. So then I spoke to my clinic and they said, oh, they also work with one in London. So I contacted the one in London and they said they don't really have many British donors, like white Caucasian, on file. They do go pretty quick. So she said, within the next month or 2, we've got 3 or 4 which are going to be released. And she said to me, she'll give me the heads up when they're coming out and send me the portfolio ahead of time before it goes live on the system. And that was it. I just picked from what came through that time. It took me 6 months to find a donor. Because also that donor also had to agree to be having the blood tests, and was also in a pandemic. So it's him going for blood tests, agreeing, because obviously he could find out he's got a disability he never knew about. So yeah, I really thank my donor. So all I know is he's got blue eyes, light brown hair, he's Australian, he's living in London, he works in a coffee shop, and he's got similar facial features to Prince Charles, as Prince Charles back in the day.
I don't even know where to start, but that's so interesting how the process works. There's so much more information that you were given, particularly for the European side, than I ever thought that you would get. And I mean, I'm so pleased that, you did find someone, but that also that person agreed to do the blood test, which, like you say, could be a daunting thing if they find out they're a carrier for something that they had no idea about.
Give him so much credit for that. And they don't get paid. If anything, they get paid expenses up to £30. So there's nothing financially in it for them to do it. So the fact that they're choosing to do this, to me, is just amazing. And, I'll ever be forever grateful for it.
How have you Like, have you come across any attitudes or presumptions about your ability to be a mom? Because, that's something that I think comes up an awful lot for disabled women. I know that we're not able to
Mhm.
either be pregnant, get pregnant, carry it to term, but then also, be an actual mom. And you mentioned, with a progressive condition, was there any pushback that you experienced?
Um, yes and no. I'd say predominantly it's all been rather positive. A few people just think I'm nuts because I'm doing it. They're like, "Oh, you've got years ahead of you. You're only in your 30s," but they don't understand my medical part. A lot of my friends think it's great. They can't wait. They think I'll be an incredible mum because I already dote over my godchildren and my nieces and my nephews. Um, they're great, and I also know other people that have gone through that. They're not disabled, but they've gone through the single mum by choice, and they've not met people and gone through the same route as me, basically. So I've got good friends in that situation as well. Even people that I have dated, because I have still gone on dates whilst I've been doing the IVF. I had seen a lad last year for 2 months, and he said he doesn't want his own children, so he's not bothered. This is the process that I want to do because he never wants his own children. So if that's what I want to do, that's up to me. It's my body. Do what you want. And another lad towards the end of last year, he said the same. It's your body. Do what you want. Um, I've only had one person I've dated that said it would probably become an issue to him because at some point he would want his own. He doesn't mind about the first child, he said, but at some point he is going to want his own. And it's whether or not I could. And they said, if you want your own, I says, I would rather you not be with me because I can't promise you that. Because I don't know how I'm going to be with this pregnancy, and if it's horrendous, I said I definitely won't want to go through it again, and I wouldn't put myself back through it. I says, but I would be more than happy to support you to go down a surrogacy route and have my eggs and go down that route. But he was very, no, but I'd want my partner to carry the child. So I was like, I'd rather not take that risk. I don't want to lead you on
Mm.
for 2 years and then it may or it may not work. From a medical perspective, they didn't know whether or not I could carry the child. So I've had to go for a lot of scans. As it stood at the moment, they've basically said I might not be allowed an epidural or the other one, what you'd have during a C-section because of all these spinal cord tumours. So it's trying to find an anaesthetist that feels confident enough to do it. As it stands at the moment, it's likely to be gas and air or a general anaesthetic C-section, because then they've also got to think about the pressure on the spine. They're trying to get me to as full term as possible, but for me to be aware that the baby could be brought early if it's causing me too many problems.
And just going back to your conversations with the men that you've sort of gone out with in this time, I think, that's so wonderful, though, that you've been having those open and honest conversations. Because I think, communication is so key in any relationship, but, particularly about something as big as this.
It's
It's
on the
so,
dating profile. It's straight
ah,
away at the top of the description. It says, like on like Hinge and some of the other apps, it says, tell me something which is non-negotiable. So mine's, I'm having IVF. I hopefully will be pregnant by the end of this year. It's non-negotiable. And then
yeah.
that's where they can sometimes ask.
Have you had, I mean, I'm saying this from like my personal experience, but then also lots of friends. Have you had the annoying, inappropriate questions?
Oh yeah. People
Yeah.
have said to me, "Oh, are you looking for sperm?" Wink, wink. We don't have to go. You don't have to go for IVFK. We could always meet up on Saturday night if you want. And I'm like, no, I'm doing IVF, so my child doesn't inherit my disability, so I have to do IVF, mate. I'm already sorted for a donor, though. Thanks, though.
Oh, pardon me.
Yeah.
That there was just gives me the ick, as I think the young people call it. But uh, I wanted to touch on, if you're comfortable talking about it, but that not that choosing to do IVF so that your child doesn't have your disability. It's something that I really understand, myself, but sort of, yeah, just how, I definitely understand it. How has that decision been for you? Was it something that was sort of obvious for you to do and something that you've always sort of thought you would want to, try and prevent if you could? Sort of, yeah, what was that like?
It's always been a bit of a tricky process. If I go back to when I was 21, when I was going out with the love of my life, we had gone to fertility clinics together, and this was never brought up. It was a case of, if I fell pregnant and the child had the condition, amazing. We'll love the child no matter what. We're in a happy relationship. We're going to be together forever. And that broke down after like 2 years, and I never got pregnant. And when I was with my ex-partner, I would say he's probably asexual, and he didn't want sex at all. He found it gross to think his parents having fun one night created him and his brother. He couldn't comprehend that. It was too much for his mind. And he had seen what I'd gone through with my pains, and he'd also seen how me and all my friends have got different complications going on. And with the condition that I live with, there's literally no two cases the same. Like, we're all affected so different, and you just don't know on how it's going to be. Even I've inherited it from my mum, and my brother doesn't have it, but I do. And even how my mum's got it and how I've got it, are again, it's completely different. So when we went for the fertility chats at the hospital, they spoke us through, you could just have a child, find out when the baby's born. You can get pregnant, find out during pregnancy, then you could choose to abort the baby or keep the baby, or you could go through IVF. And I've already said from the off, I'd never ever abort a child, not a chance. So he said that he would feel more comfortable going through the IVF route if we were to have children. He said because he couldn't, even though like he loved me to pieces, he didn't want that child to go through what I've gone through and what my friends have gone through. And he said, I know that we'd be able to support the child and, be brought up in a loving home. But if that child grew up and knew you had a choice to ensure that they don't have it and you chosen for them to take that risk, he felt it could cause complications. And we had a big chat about it, then decided to go through the IVF route.
What a big decision, though, to have to make. And I think it's really difficult when it's your own disability, because I just reminds me of this time. It was by far the weirdest job interview I have ever had. It was in a church, and it was in a room under the organ in this church, which is the most bizarre place that they could have rented out to do a job interview. But they were a charity that, advocated for, screenings during pregnancy and sort of all of those things. And they asked me what were my views on abortion, and if there was a child with a genetic condition, which I have as well. And I thought that was a really difficult question to ask and to answer, because you sort of can look at it either from the personal lens or through the theoretical. And in that interview, I went for the theoretical. If it's up to the family, it's choice. I'm for screening, and I'm massively pro-choice. I think that's a huge topic that we're talking about in the news and everything right now. But I think it's got to be so much more difficult if you were thinking, is it not just your child but also your condition. And just what you said about having to think about, well, would I want the child to go through what I've been through? And my answer, similar to you, would be no. I wouldn't want someone to experience all of the challenges and everything that I have, all of the pain that comes with it and all of that. But you had to make that decision and from a practical perspective. And I can't imagine that was easy.
And it's practical as well now, because we laugh about it with my gran, because when we told my gran I was doing IVF, she went, "Oh, why don't you just go to town and have fun?" And I just looked at my gran, just like so shocked. I was like, "Gran, like what?" She's like, "Well, just go to town and have fun and enjoy yourself if you want a child that much." And so I was like, it's a bit risky. And obviously, if the new fibromatosis wasn't thingy, then you could well do that. I could save myself thousands of pounds. But then I sat there from the opposite side, and I thought, the child's already going to be, as it currently stands, obviously theoretically grown up without a dad. It's just me doing it on my own. I don't want then to add the disability to it on top of it as well. And trying to give the child the best start in life, it's, God forbid I found out during pregnancy they had another disability, or they were born with another disability, you're still going to love your child no matter what. You work through it. But if I could stop them having my own due to what I've experienced and quite a few of my friends, then no, I'd never want them to go through that. And I'm sure I'd probably say the majority of people wouldn't want the children to go through endless rigmaroles, treatment, tablets, and you'd want to ensure your child is okay and healthy. If you can.
I think particularly when about being a carrier for something, or the high chance of it manifesting in your child, like you said, there are things that you won't know because there are so many conditions, and you're never going to screen for all of them. And completely agree, you love the child, you work it out no matter what. Obviously that's from like my position as not a parent, but I understand where you're coming from with that. It's if you have the knowledge, let's use that knowledge and make an informed choice. And it's really interesting. It's a conversation that I think comes up with various disabled people, and it came up from me I think for the first main time when I was in a medical ethics lecture at university, and so there were no other disabled students in the class. It was just me, but someone's brother was deaf, and said that he would never give up his his deafness, and it was part of who he was and all of that, which I thought, okay, I understand, but would you not want to give up the challenges that come with your condition? Yes, being disabled gives us a lot of assets. I think it teaches us a lot about who we are, a lot about other people, and can make us very compassionate, empathetic people. But it's it's a really difficult one. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
No, I can totally agree with what you say. It's like I wouldn't change who I am or what I've done and where I've gone, because quite a lot of what I've done and where I've gone is linked to having the disability. And these days, especially in comparison to when I was a wee child, is they now do camps and stuff for people with my disability. So then, children, they're not going to be alone. There will be the support groups, and they can get that from an earlier off. I would have the disability, the child will have it. You've got that support group, where when I was a child, that was non-existent. So it is a tricky one, but and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's like I've got friends who have recently had children who have my disability, and they chose not to go down the IVF route. They took the chance. Both of their children both have NF. And then I've got other friends that have chosen to go down the same route as myself. And I just think whichever route people want to go down, it should just be respected.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think, you're never going to make a more personal decision. There's never going to be something more important, and it has to be what is right for you. And yeah, absolutely zero judgment either way. It's your body, it's your family, you get to pick.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in how your podcast and your work is resonating with people. You've mentioned your friends who have the same condition, but how is it generally being received by the disabled community, really?
I'd say so. Obviously, I've got two parts of the podcast. So I've got the Love, Life, and Disability, which is looking at me going through IVF as a single person by choice. And I'd say that's been going down quite well. So I've had quite a few messages on like Facebook, for example, where people are saying that a lot of the time the PGD part of IVF is never really spoke about, and it's good for them to be hearing from other people that are doing it. And they're at the start of the line, so they're just about to start this journey where I'm 2.5 years further along. So then they're asking questions on, oh, what was this part like? What do the needles look like? Do they hurt? How often were you having them? And again, from a medical perspective, that's just my medical journey. Theirs could be completely different, but it's trying to help them out as well and do what you can. And then the same as well for my single parent by choice is I've become good friends with some other people, and then other people have opened up to me that aren't disabled, and they were saying that they want to go down this route because they've still not met somebody, and they're concerned that they're getting a little bit older. And in conversations with, they've been landing quite well. So a few people have said that even if they're disabled or not, they've learned new things through it, which is ultimately what we're looking for. Is to, I hate using the word inspire because it's like inspirational porn, but a lot of people like it's good to see. Like for instance, I interviewed a racing driver. He drives for Team Brit, and I love go-karting, but I'm not quick enough to get out of the carts in case there's a fire. And just to learn how he's gone about that and the training and what he's put into that, and with his disability, it's incredible. It's like, wow, I really look up to you, mate. Like you're doing something that I really wanted to do growing up, and he's doing it. He's smashing it, and I love
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
I think it's so important though that this representation exists of like different disabled people doing different things.
Mhm.
And that's really what like my motivation with this podcast is, to get disabled people who are doing different jobs and doing different things in life to really show that things are possible. Because I
Mhm.
remember as a kid, meeting the first other person with my condition, SMA, who had a child. And it just sort of struck me as, oh, you can do that. Like, I just sort of assumed that it wasn't a thing. And,
Mhm.
not that it like changed my decisions or anything like that. It was like, oh, okay, I can see this as a possibility. Whereas, before it was something I thought, well, that can't possibly be a thing. So I can just imagine, yeah, I tend to veer away from the word inspirational as well,
Yeah,
but it can provide like,
help and
yeah,
reassurance that we can do things. We may have to customize it and do it a little bit differently, but it helps us to understand that things are possible, and that, like I say, we just may need to adapt something in a certain way.
mm.
And it's about us trying to work it out as well.
And it's about giving us the same choices as everyone else.
Mhm.
Like exactly what you just said, it may need adapting, but that doesn't mean that it's not an option. So I mean, I'm so pleased that you are sharing your journey, because I'm sure there's so many young disabled women who will be listening to you speak about your experience and think, maybe that's an option for me. Or even if it's
Mhm.
not, just, knowing that someone else is doing it and challenging this perception of
Yeah,
what
challenging the
does,
status quo.
yeah, and what disabled women want, in terms of reproduction and, all of that. It's so important. I think in, my circle of friends, a lot of the time it's that more that presumed, like I said before, presumed that you're not sexually active and all of that. And the amount of times, you'll go for an x-ray or something, and no one's going to check if you might be pregnant because they just assume that you're not. And, you having to take the onus of sort of, if if there is a risk, being like, hey, by the way, and like being that voice. But I think it is really, I think empowering might be
Yeah.
the better word to, hear about people who not only are doing single parenthood by choice, but are also doing it with a disability.
Yeah. One thing that I really loved, and we've touched upon it a few times, is about where the people just assume disabled people don't have sex. Is with Maze and Isaac in sex education. That love scene between those two, I just thought was incredible, because it kind of shows that you can have a love interest just because you've got disability. They're not your carer, they're not your facilitator. You can have a partner, and it can be same sex, opposite sex, and you can have sex, and you can be in love with each other.
Yeah, I really love that too. And I love the honesty of that scene as well. And, that, Isaac was, a complex character as well. He wasn't, I always go back to the me before you, example. Have you seen that film? Yeah. And
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, because they've got like 2 films now, haven't they? But yeah, I've seen it.
it's just, that disability is so tragic. And like you said, you can have a partner that isn't a carer, and she literally was his carer in Me Before You. But no, I really love that representation as well, and I hope that we see more of it. But yeah, so I'm interested in the podcast that you do, sort of like what's your hope and aims with it?
I'd probably say similar to yourself. It's trying to get that further and wider reach. I've always said, even if it's just one person that I can help, and this journey, let's say with the IVF part, can help somebody through it, and it feels like they've got a familiar voice, someone to check in with, and that support to help them out, then the better. Or even if I'm to help somebody who's non-disabled learn about a disability, or maybe it's the first time someone's coming across this genetic condition. So when I had my website, for example, back when I was a young child, I wrote the website because I didn't really know everything that was going on with me. And if I'm going through it, other people might be in a similar situation, is to let them know that they're not alone, and that there are other people going through this, and just want to support people, and I guess help people out where possible. Seeing if it's one person, 100 people, or tens and thousands, but it's changing that perception as well, for non-disabled people especially, that we might be disabled, but we can still do what we want to do, and to give us a chance, and instead of people writing us off all the time.
You sort of touched on it there, but as you were talking, I was going to ask you, what is it that you hope a non-disabled person takes away from what you're sharing?
I'd say for me, it would be about the education, and to stop judging. And I guess, I don't know what word to use. It's just basically where people just assume. It's ask. It's like that perception side of things. Oh, you're a wheelchair user. People just assume straight away you can't have sex. Or like a lot of time when you see some disabilities on TV, it's all the benefit frauds, benefit cheats, and then you've got that route as well. It's trying to educate people, more so than anything, that we can do stuff, but sometimes we may need to adapt it in order to do it, but to give us that chance.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, the various forms of media are very much responsible for the misconceptions around disability and disabled people. And I think if we can get more authenticity, either from, directly from disabled creators like you and me, but also from, more authentic representation, like in sex education that you mentioned, then that's really going to go a long way. And I hope that, the next generation of disabled people, which ultimately is, what I think people like you and I are trying to influence, to try and take away some of the barriers that they will come across that we went through. I hope that really does translate. So I wanted to ask you, what would you say is something that you are the most proud of?
I'd say probably it's a tricky one because I don't want to say having a job, because just because I'm disabled, I shouldn't be proud that I've got a job.
You can
It
say
should be my
that.
human right to be able to work. But I'd say probably getting my first house, because I managed to do it in my 20s, and I've done it all on my own. Didn't get any financial support from my parents or anything. I grafted at work, saved and saved, did the whole house deposit, helped to buy, and bought my first home. And I've had to get it adapted at points and stuff for me able to live in it and to be as independent as possible. But I've done it, and again, I think I've just done it all on my own. So if I've done this on my own, hopefully I can be a parent on my own as well. Where a lot of people, I see couples and they still haven't bought houses, or my brother didn't even buy a house until he could afford it with his partner. And they're on a hell of a lot more money than me, and it's 2 wages coming in. But I think for me, that's my proudest part, in that I can look and think, I've done this myself.
I feel like we need to have a chat afterwards about how the hell you did that and how I could potentially do that. Because wow, that's amazing.
It's literally having no social life. Don't smoke, don't drink, don't go out, and be a very boring person, and be smart, financial savvy. I have Excel sheets and track absolutely everything. Cash will change bank accounts non-stop. Always looking for the highest interest and trying to stay on top of absolutely everything, and save.
Wow, that's incredible. As you were saying, no social life, don't drink, don't smoke. I thought, right, check, check, check. And then about saving, and I'm sitting here looking at my dog thinking, yeah, your toys are the reason that I don't have my own house right now. But I think that that's so incredible. So I suppose the flip side of that, what would you say is the hardest barrier that you've had to overcome?
I'd say the hardest part is, and I'm still petrified, is injections and needles. I knew doing IVF, I'm going to need injections on a daily basis, and they are my biggest fear. And to the point, I'm 32. I've literally always had magic cream. People hold my hand. Well, I always swear to then willingly inject yourself twice a day, every single day, and then you're then going to have to do it again every single day for 12 weeks in order to get what you want. It's just focus on the prize, focus on the prize. Keep coming, and people are like, are you used to them yet? And I'm like, nope. I have to move back into my mum and dad so that they can help me out. I can't do it. I can't inject myself, but I'm lucky that my family are there to support me through it. But I'd say that's probably one of my hardest barriers that I'm having to overcome. And other than that, I'd just say people's stigma and people's attitudes, the medical model of disability. I say it's a funny one for you. So there's a pub in Manchester. I won't say the name of the venue because they do get regular emails off me. And it seems to be this one place where quite a few of my non-disabled friends will just flock. And I tell them it's not accessible. But it's got 2 steps to get in, so I'm fine with that. And every time I go, they've now made their disabled toilet a beer storage thing with all the used canisters, food, all the things that they've thrown in the bin, to the point you cannot get to the toilet. And it did used to say disabled toilet. They've now took the sign off and changed it to staff private. But I know there's a toilet in there, and it's the only one on that floor. Everything else is on floor 3. There's no lift in the venue, so you can't even, if you want to go, you've got to do the stairs if you want to go to the toilet. I know it's in there. It says staff room, and I'll just walk in every single time. And it's like, we've passed all this sort of thing on my crutches. And then I get a load of ball ache when I come out, and I'm just like, disable toilet, mate. Disable toilet. Like, what do you want me to do about it? I need a wee.
I mean, I think that that's so much worse than there just not being one at all, because there was one. It's actually being actively taken away. And
Because they want to
that's
store their rubbish in it. So
such
I refuse to buy a drink in the venue. I'll just have water, because I don't agree to be funding a business that doesn't support disabled people.
Yeah,
So I refuse to even buy an actual drink, and I'll just say, no, I just want water, please.
yeah. No, I completely understand that, and I'm just so angry on your behalf
Yeah.
that they've done that, and that it's an active choice.
Yeah. And this is what winds me. I'd understand if the toilet wasn't working and it had a plumbing issue and it's out of use. Fair enough. But no, the fact that they're willingly choosing to basically not allow disabled people to go to a toilet it's just annoying. And it's like I've made my friend know that I'm not happy with the venue of choice. And they're like, oh yeah, but it's the most central location. And I'm just like, but still, come on guys. Let's go elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's I'm just so angry on your
Mhm.
behalf that they've done that, and I think that that's it's absolutely not okay. And
Ignorance.
and it just sort of it speaks to how far the rights for disabled people really have to go. I mean, there is definitely a lot of work in terms of challenging public perceptions and all of that around disability. But when you're dealing with crap like that, you just sort of think, really, really,
Mm-hmm.
and it is quite disheartening at times. But I mean, I'm glad that you don't give them any of your hard-earned money, because
They
they
don't deserve
certainly
it.
No, they absolutely don't.
No. There's an incredible venue in Manchester. Big shout out to them. They're called 53-2. And it's run by Simon Naylor. And he recently even applied to get Arts Funding Council, because he wants to make a changing place toilet in the venue. And he's also got a theatre there as well. And unfortunately, Arts Council said no, wouldn't provide it. And next Saturday coming up, so end of the month, it's the 53-2's first anniversary of them being there in Manchester. So he's kind of like, screw the system. We've done it once before about money. We'll do it again. First birthday party. So they're now raising money next week, so then they can, through their first birthday, to see if they can get enough money to get changing place installed. The teaching staff BSL. So then you could then, if you're a BSL user, in theory, order a pint in BSL. And it's the most accessible venue in town. Like everything about it, they've got a doorbell on the front. So then if you can't open the door, you can press the doorbell, someone will come in, they'll open it up. If you're not able to take your drinks, even if you can or can't, they'll bring it to you. You've got seats at different levels. So then if you prefer to sit up, sit down. Very accommodating.
Wow, they sound amazing.
They just get it and they care, and it's all genuine.
I think that's the biggest difference what you just said there. They care.
Yeah.
Because I say this a lot, but I try not to fault people too much on like lack of awareness on things if they've never experienced it as a barrier. Like I think, the typical example is a non-disabled person who, say they just pop into their local shop and they don't notice if there's a step there because that step isn't a barrier for them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hold them necessarily responsible for not realizing this, but it's after you have realized it and you still don't care, that's when I have a problem.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, and I saw there was a piece on your website that you wrote to your younger self, but I think for all of the listeners of this podcast, I want to ask, what advice would you give your younger self?
It's just, I'd sum it up basically in 2 sentences these days, which is be who you are and say what you feel, because those that mind don't matter and those that matter don't mind.
I really love that. And I think it's such good advice for everyone, but I think particularly for disabled people who live in a constant, I don't want to say fear, but this constant worry maybe about other people's perceptions of you because of, inaccurate media representation or, assumptions of what you can and can't do in every stage of an area of life. Then, you always are a bit apprehensive around saying things that you feel or that you want and if you feel it's going to rock the boat. So yeah, no, I just think that's such good advice. So I want to ask you, what advice would you give to disabled women who may not have thought about motherhood as an option until hearing your experience?
It's everything is an option, and especially these days, there's just not one straight road to be a parent. If you are single, you've got the donor sperm route, you've got foster to adopt, you've got adoption, and you've also then got as well, if you're able to carry, you can go ahead yourself. You've also got IVF, you've got IUI. There's families being created these days through many, many different avenues. And if that's something that you want to do, don't let other people tell you that you can't do it, because you can do it. It just may be going through a different route. So if they say you're not able to have children, maybe you've got no eggs, or maybe you're not well enough to carry, well, okay, you could always get donor eggs, and you could also then get surrogacy. There's many different ways that you can become a parent. And it's like I've said to people, for me, it's not about carrying the child. I want to be a parent. So whatever way I come to that thing, ultimately, I just want to be a parent. So whether or not it was the adoption route, whether or not it was surrogacy, whether or not, whatever way it is, ultimately, that's what I want to be as a parent. I want to be a mum. And yeah, blood doesn't create family, it's love does. So.
Oh, I love that. That's really sweet. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, everyone knows so many different groups of people, whether they're blood related or not, that constitute a family. And I'm so pleased that there are people like you who are sharing their experience, because I hope it has that impact on another disabled person who, like me, didn't think that being disabled and being a parent and having a child was a thing. So yeah, I'm so pleased that you came on The Wheelchair Activist and shared your experience so openly and honestly with us. And the offer still stands. If you want me to go and run over your ex, I will do it. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to meet you and to talk to you.
No, likewise, Emma, thank you so much. And hopefully people will have found it useful. And of course, if they've got any questions about IVF or the PGD part of the treatment, which I'm undergoing at the moment, then, just drop me a message and help them out where I can. We're all friends, we're all family here in our disabled community as well. And it's about helping to support one another.
Absolutely. And I will make sure that your website and your social medias will be in the description of this episode. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Wheelchair Activist with Kay Ashton. It's been so interesting talking to her and learning about the amazing ways that you can start a family in whatever way and form that is to you. It's usually at this point that I ask everyone to donate what they can to the accessibility of this podcast. But given the recent events in the United States, the Wheelchair Activist team has decided to ask everyone to donate what they can to Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood delivers vital reproductive health care, sex education, and information to millions of people worldwide. We realize that this is a very scary time for women and girls across the world who are worried about their access to a safe and legal abortion. We stand with everyone scared, and we will continue to fight with you until everyone has the right to choose what they do with their own body. Thank you so much for listening. Please donate what you can to Planned Parenthood, and we will see you in the next episode.